All right, we're recording. I always want to say we're live, and while certainly you and I are live, listeners, you're not listening to this live. You're getting the edited version. Super pumped today for our guest. Please help me welcome Derrick Peterson from DePaul University. Derrick, how are you, man?
I'm well. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to chatting a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I was thinking about this interview with you, and we've had some amazing guests that we've talked about a lot of different topics, a lot of the career advice and how different coaches have gotten to different stages of their different universities and levels. And certainly we want to touch on that with you, Derrick. But we've got a unique opportunity here with you, I thought, with this real specificity to the 800 meter. You were an awesome 800 meter runner, and now you have parlayed that into being an awesome 800 meter coach. So I think we're going to focus on the 800 meter today and make this an 800 meter podcast. How's that sound?
Sounds pretty good to me. Just a little disclaimer: I don't claim to be the all-knowing of everything 800. I'm just a guy who suffered through
it. Suffered through it. That's it. Hey, you know, this is hard to say. I was an 800 meter runner in high school. Now, the reason I say it's hard for me to say that is it was pedestrian at best. I shared yesterday on a different podcast that I'll publish later my training for high school, and it's I don't know if you could actually call it training, Derrick. It was pretty miserable. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the half mile. Derrick, you're actually from my kind of neck of the woods. You're from Georgia. I grew up in Alabama. Let's start with, how did you find the 800 meter? Were you an 800 meter guy from the get go, or what happened
here? Yep, definitely from Georgia. Got my start way down in Southeast Georgia, and Waycross, Georgia, to be exact. I started running track as a 7th grade. Actually, was it 6th grade? Might have been 6th grade. My middle school had just started track and field. So during that time frame, it was really just kind of everyone doing any and everything that you could possibly do. So I kind of dabbled in a few different events. I hadn't really found who I was as a track athlete at that time, so I was kind of doing everything. Once I got to Waycross High School for 1 year, I kind of did some 400s, kind of did a little bit 800, a little bit of the mile. Really just kind of finding my niche there. My coach kind of thought I'd be fairly decent in those events at the time. I think I did run a decent 800 at some point my 9th grade year. But no, I remember making it to the state meet. I didn't do quite well. But I went back and looked at like all the archives of like the state meets in Georgia, and somewhere along the lines I ran like a 154, and that I completely never knew about. But from there,
do you hold on before you get past that? I got to know, as a guy who's run, I mean, what would you estimate? Have you run hundreds of 800s at this point?
Oh man, exact number don't know, but definitely I think I'm definitely well up over the 50 mark.
Wow. What do you remember your very first 800 meter race?
Sadly enough, no.
You just blocked it out. It was that painful.
It was to get off the line and get to the finish line is what it was.
There it is. You know, the good athletes make it sound so simple. Get off the line, get to the finish line. You know, this is 2 laps of pain, man. As a guy who experienced that, it was not get off the line and get to the finish line for me. It was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then it just kept going for, unfortunately, multiple minutes for me.
Yeah. So I mean, back in those days, I think for me, it was, I don't even think my coach gave me much strategy. It was literally do what you got to do to win.
And that'll be, we'll talk about that when we get to how you coach the 800, because strategy is really all over the place for the 800. And maybe that's why coach didn't give you a strategy, because it's, you know, there's go to the front, there's kick, sit and kick, all these kind of things. So we'll get to that. You said, it's interesting. You said, now I know Georgia track. You said you made it to the state meet your freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal in Georgia. That's a heck of a track state, my man.
It is. You know, at the time, I probably didn't relish it. When I was done, I you know, kind of look back on my career and I was like, wow, you know, to be at the state meet, all 4 years of your high school career, 2 different high schools, but all 4 years of your high school career, You know, one says something about the coaches that I had the opportunity to work with, but also a testament to, wanting to do something other than just sit around the house.
Yeah, yeah. See, I was the opposite. I just wanted to sit around the house back then. That's all I wanted to do. When did it click for you? So, so far you're describing that you did some quarters, you did some 8s, some miles, things like that. When did you in high school? And maybe it didn't happen in high school, but in high school, when did it click? Like you became a half miler? What year? And what was there a race or a practice? When did that become like your identity in regards to your track event?
Um, I Probably my sophomore year of high school. We had just moved to the Atlanta area, and I started attending Lovejoy High School on the south side of Atlanta. And I qualified for state in the 1600 and the 800. And just to give a little backstory on the history of our high school, we were a fairly decent program when it came to the middle distance and distance races. My coach, my high school coach, Richard Westbrook, to date, I think he's the only coach in Georgia who's coached 4 different 1600 meter state champions from different schools. One of those includes myself, current women's head coach Alan Drosky at Georgia Tech, and his assistant Becky Megacy, and a young man named Jason Murphy who went off to UAB. Let me forget Kevin Graham, who ran for Drosky at Georgia Tech. So there's kind of this long lineage of milers who come through our program, or at least have some touch with Coach Westbrook. So my first year there, I qualified in the 1600, qualified in the 800. I had a teammate who was pretty much favored to win the 1600. So we both qualified through. I think I ran a decent 8. I finished 3rd that year. I'll never remember, because I think it was like the big year of in Georgia of one of the, at that time, icons of track and field, Milton Campbell, who went off to be a fairly good quarter miler at UNC.
Fairly good, yeah.
Yeah. So he was doing the 400, 800 double, and I was in awe of this guy.
Oh,
how the heck? It's 100+ degrees out here, and he's got to run prelims and everything of the 8. And, he went on to win, ran something ridiculously fast. But at the time, I didn't necessarily specialize myself as an 800 meter runner. I was just, a middle distance guy, or at that time, a distance guy, really. Just kind of following and doing what coach said to do. I put my trust in his training, put my trust in, his direction. And, we had some conversations when I first got there about what I wanted to do and what I thought I could do. And he did everything he could to make sure those dreams came true for me. Obviously, those included a couple state titles. And he was really the driving force that really pushed me to even become a force in Georgia cross country history.
I'm always amazed and just in awe of coaches and their positive impact they have on kids, high school 14 and up, and 18 to 22 years old in college. How much of a factor was your success based on that statement you made there, that you put your trust in him? Like it almost sounded like you were just like, you tell me to run through that wall, I'll do it if that makes me a better runner. How much of that just full trust in your coach and his coaching philosophies would you attribute to your success in high school?
I'd definitely say a fairly good amount of it. I mean, I didn't know much about running, didn't know much about racing at that time. So, the only thing I did have was what my coach's word was. And that was pretty much it. You go to practice, you go to competition, you go to summer camp in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, and coach says it's gonna make you better, and that's what you do.
Do they still do that camp in Asheville? I remember that from high school.
They do.
That's awesome.
It's, a great camp. I've went there for 3 years as a camper, came back as a counselor, came back as a guest speaker. Without that camp, I don't think my appreciation and love for the mountains of North Carolina would be here today. And, I still try to get up to that area as often as I can.
I remember seeing the ads in like Runner's World and Running Magazine. It was like an aspiration. I wanted to go there. I never could for multiple reasons, but I remember that was a really famous camp. I'm glad that it's still going. That's super cool. Lots of memories from that camp from people who attended and as counselors. That's really cool. So let's go through junior and senior year and maybe put those together. I know you won some state titles. What kind of, like, do you remember a breakthrough race? And, the half mile is kind of a interesting event, right? The first impact you have to do is you have to become sub 2, right? That's kind of like the first, just from numbers. And then I don't know, because I never got past that. So is it 155? Do you start thinking, oh, okay, I'm pretty good? Or 150? I mean, 150 is a whole, especially in high school, ballpark. Do you remember a breakthrough race or anything like that?
As far as the 800 goes, I think it was the state meet that I finished third at. That would have been 90, 92, maybe 90, year 93, 94, somewhere in that time frame. Because I graduated high school in 96. But I think what that race did, it kind of showed me that I had range. Up until then, I just kind of saw myself in this little pocket of, all right, I'm gonna do this event, I'm gonna do this event. And that's where I'm gonna, excel. But again, I think with the knowledge that my high school coach had at the time and kind of seeing things down the road for me, as far as like what he thought I could do at the collegiate level, it was more of a conservative approach to training and racing, and really, I think setting me up really well for that next 4-year cycle of my life at the collegiate level. We trained hard. We didn't race a lot. We did race like the big invitationals and, kind of prepared for, at that time we had county championship, regional championship, and then you had the state championship. So once you got into that postseason part of track and field, it was kind of brutal. County championships, you got all 7 schools in your county going against you, and then we were in Region 4 Quad A, which stretched from like the southern tip of the Atlanta metro area all the way down to Columbus, Georgia. So a lot of teams in there we had to compete against, and you got 16 people on the line, only 2 of you go on to the state meet. It makes it really tough.
Yeah, but spoiler alert, knowing your future after that, that became a theme. You being on the line and only 2 moving on to the next one, or only 3 move on. So that was good practice for you in your future there. So you parlayed this, and you get to be good enough, I'm doing air quotes there, to have colleges interested in you running. So tell me about the recruiting process. What were you running that made you attract, like what was your PR, so maybe people can understand what level you were at, and what schools did you look at, and why did you ultimately decide where you went?
So I think at that time, I guess we can jump a little bit to junior, senior year of high school. At that time, I've kind of blossomed into a fairly decent guy on the cross country course. Really started doing some things at the 1600 meter distance. I think my time at that point was like 4:16, 4:17. I have started to emerge on the cross country course, like I said, as a contender for a state championship there. And then my senior year of high school, I'll never forget this conversation. My coach was like, I think you should run the 3200. It's like, that's interesting. I think it's one of the few times in my career that I was like,
not too sure about this one.
I'm not too sure about this one. But I know why. He did it. He always has a reason for stuff. And so, but once I let go of the fear of this event that was sort of an unknown for me, He said I can do it. I was like, all right, give it a go. Let's go do it.
What'd you end up running there?
That was my senior year. Ran 3,200. I ran 9:17 and 9:18.
Okay, so
never forget it was blistering hot.
Yeah, well, and blistering time, for crying out loud. Let me ask you, as a guy, help us understand, as a guy who didn't do this, I'm coming from completely outside here. Yeah, I keep, it's interesting, and you got to keep pushing back on me. I keep pigeonholing you into the 800, but you were an athlete in the sense of 1,600 cross country. I'm assuming you're running 5K for your cross country season. You're in contention to win state. You're all state, I'm assuming at this point. You are running really good 800s and 416, almost 415 in the mile. Why did the 2 mile in track? I think I'm using your words. Don't beat me up here. Why did it scare you? It's right in between. You've done 3.1 miles. You've done 800. Why is the 200 on the track scary?
I think it was mostly the sheer volume of the actual race. Up until then, I had never run a 3,200 until my senior year. I literally ran 3 3,200s. I ran one at a dual meet. The second one was at the regional meet to qualify for state, and the third one was at the state meet. So I think a lot of it was just fear of the unknown. And I think some of it was, here's an event that at that time, I didn't feel like I could win. Mm-hmm. And back then it was kind of all about wins and losses. Now I have to come to an understanding that, it isn't all about all about winning. But at that time, that's what it was about. It was about winning.
What about being on the track? Because you've done 2+ miles on a cross. Is there something about being on a track and you're running 8 laps versus cross country, which is more divided into mile segments? You're running 3 miles and you're thinking about what's my 1 mile, then what's my 2nd mile, what's my 3rd mile? Is it that finite? I'm staring at 8 laps around. Is that where the difference comes?
I can think probably from a psychological standpoint, yeah, there's probably something that has something to do with the fact that you could actually count and visibly see 8 laps ahead of you, and you do one, you got 7 more, and you're racing 8 to 12 guys that all could win this race and are fairly familiar with the race.
Interesting. So talk to us about college. You had several options as a 9:15, 4:15. What was your half mile PR coming out of high school?
I think it was only 1:54.
Really?
Yeah.
That does surprise me.
I didn't run many half miles in high school. I honestly didn't come into my own as a half miler until college.
That's super interesting. Again, your middle name to me is 800 meters, right? So, I keep like the whole goal was to talk to you about 800, and man, you kind of blossomed late in that sense in regards to what you ultimately accomplished in that specific event. Wow. All right. So, okay. I keep interrupting you. Go talk to us about colleges and what you were thinking and why you ultimately made the decision.
College came once I got that first collegiate letter. I think was when I kind of really realized that, hey, this is something I could do at the collegiate level, and could ultimately, help me get, higher education than, So, I don't even know where to start there. There were so many. Not saying I was great or good or anything, but it was at a point where I think I had my own mailbox in my guidance counselor's office because so much mail was coming in.
Hey, and don't worry about looking about being humble. And you are one of the most humblest people I know. Honestly, when you have success like this, and I know you are proud, but be proud of it. That's awesome that there was that many different schools that would be interested in you, not only as an athlete, but as the student you were too. You don't get that interest if you're a 1.0 GPA guy. You were wanted for your personhood and your student ability and your athletic ability.
Yeah, man. So, it ranged from, some top tier D1 schools, all the way down to a couple of D3 schools, a few Ivy League schools. And, um, ultimately, I always envisioned myself at the University of Florida. That was the school that I was in love with. Even before track came into the picture, I was controversial in my family because we are staunch UGA fans. So to deviate
Yeah, that's
from
sacrilege.
not going to Georgia, you don't even want to go to Athens. What's going on? We may disown you if you even end up in Gainesville. But
Right.
so I'll never forget. I told my dad that, and he just had this look about it, like, okay, well, as long as they're okay with me wearing my Georgia gear at track meets, I'm okay. I could be okay with it.
Priorities.
So as Southern rivalries go,
Mm-hmm.
they hold strong, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, so initially I envisioned myself being at the University of Florida. At the time, oh shoot, what was his name? Doug had just left the University of Tennessee to take over as the head coach at Florida. Coach Holloway was there as well.
Was that Doug Hill?
And who was that?
Yeah.
I don't want to say Doug Williamson because that was Alabama.
Yeah, that was Danny Williamson, I think, right? Doug
It'll come to
Williamson.
me
Yeah, Doug
eventually.
Williamson. Yeah.
But so yeah, so I taken a few visits, kind of gone all over the country, and checked out programs and heard coaches and everyone. Got to know them very well, which I think is, even to this day, some of those relationships that were built through the recruiting process have allowed me to still be able to contact those coaches and to be able to have genuine conversations with them. But so I took all my visits. I was pretty much done, ready to shut the recruiting process down and become a Gator. Had the paper at that time, and I guess we still kind of do it, but at that time they mail you the NLIs, and sit on my coffee table. I hadn't signed it yet, and my high school coach kind of encouraged me to take one more visit, but I'd only taken 4. So my last visit was to the University of Missouri, which I took in late April, I believe. I'll never forget
Wow.
it because it was April and it was snowing. I was like, what the hell?
Oh.
What is this? Like, nope, this is not a good look. Getting off the plane, it's snowing. This cannot work for me. But so I do the visit, do the whole recruiting 48 hours, and really most recruiting visits, for most part are really the same. You sit in a lot of meetings, talking to coaches, talking to people that you're going to interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I'll never forget, I was having, because I flew into Kansas City with my coach at the time, Jeff Pig, who's currently the director of track and field at the University of North Florida. We drove from Kansas City into Columbia, which is about a 2-hour drive. I just remember the conversation that we were having in the car. It was genuine. It was about just stuff. We found out that we have some commonalities. We were both fairly similar in our upbringings, and we didn't talk a lot about track and a lot about running. It was mostly about who are you? What do you want to become? What do you want to do? Kind of that stuff. And really, a lot of that conversation has kind of shaped how I even do my own recruiting as a coach now. But I'll never forget the conversation we had on that 2-hour drive. And then once I got to campus and kind of met the rest of the crew, the rest of the coaching staff, I just felt a genuineness about the people that I was going to be surrounding myself with for the next 4 years.
That's interesting. I didn't know Jeff Pig was your coach. I've gotten to work with him several times for his facility at North Florida, and then through regionals and things like that. And I can't say enough good things about that man. He is. You said the word genuine. That is exactly how I would describe him. He is just a genuine guy. I mean, I hate to say what you see is what you get, but he's just he only knows one thing: how to be himself. And
Exactly.
thank goodness that that self is a really good guy, a really good
Yeah.
human. So that's cool. I did not know he was your coach. So you ended up even through. It cracks me up that it was a last second visit. Essentially, it was it was snowing, and you're from Georgia. And your alternative, by the way, is Gainesville,
Yeah.
and you still go to Columbia, Missouri.
Yep.
Wow. That speaks volumes right there. That's awesome. So you get recruited as a cross country distance athlete. You're really, based on your times, you're a miler, 2 miler recruit type of recruit.
Yeah.
Uh, we know this is where you now come into your own as a half miler. Talk to us of that process. So was it immediate? How did that come about during the college career?
So we had ran a couple. We had run a couple of races indoor. Hadn't really, again, at that point, hadn't really established myself as a half miler. Um, we back a little story. So my freshman year at Mizzou was the first year of the Big 12 conference, the original Big 12 conference. So at that time, you got all the Big 8 schools, and you got the 4 Texas schools that added to the conference joining the conference. So I didn't know much about any of the schools at that time. So I'm just a naive freshman out there just doing my thing. So we get to our first Big 12 championship indoors at the University of Nebraska. Pretty much a pretty even field, I think, across the representation of all the schools in the conference at that time. And so my first conference race I win, which, we'll get into a little story down the road too, of how that first win kind of led to the next 7.
Okay.
So I win that race, and even then I'm not fully convinced that I'm a half miler just yet. I'm just like, all right, cool. Got lucky, ran a race that that was winnable. At the time, the Big 12 was kind of loaded with distance runners. You got Adam Goucher out of Colorado. You got,
Oh yeah.
a huge crew of guys that were at Nebraska at that time. Kansas State had some guys. Coach Harbor was doing some really good stuff with the Baylor crew. Coach Harbor and Coach Hart at the time. So there were a lot of guys to try to beat in the events that I were kind of recruited for. So we took a gamble on the 800, and it turned into a little bit of historic run, a historic run for me and us. But it was the outdoor season that year that really cemented my 800 meter. We went out first meet of the year outdoor spring break trip. We go to Stanford. I get put in 1500. If most of you know your track history at that time, and Stanford was the place to be for most milers at the time. You got Jason Lund, you got Michael Stember, you got Gabe Jennings, you got the Hauser twins, pretty much the who's who of American distance run at that time. So I get put in 1500. All those guys ran the 1500, and that same heat, the 1500. I get blown away, like just annihilated. I don't even know what I ran. That's how much I got annihilated. I haven't even gone back to look at past results of that race. All I remember was finishing that race, going to Jeff, and having a conversation with him on spot about, I think we need to do something different.
Look, man, we need to sit down. We need to have a talk.
Yeah, I was like, what do you mean, training wise? I'm like, no, I think I need to run something different. Because what I just experienced out there, I don't know that I can do that again. And to his credit, Jeff did a great job. I'm not gonna lie. of really working with me and listening to me. Because even further into my career, I had this massive mental block with 1500. And that's why you don't see my 1500 meter time being anything spectacular. Yes, I ran a couple for training purposes, but I couldn't get over that first race. And that's really what kind of just moved me into that direction of being a half mile. And I was like,
Yeah,
all right.
because the choice, if you're not going to be a 15, is go all the way to the 5 if we skip over the steeple, of course, right? So that's I mean, that seems so daunting, where the half mile seems like, oh, okay, it's just one step down.
Right. And I knew I had some leg speed, and I was on most of our 4x4s at that time too. And I was like, well, I think it could work for me.
And are you running on the cross country team as well?
I am.
Yeah. So, so would that be called the point where, okay, I am now a half miler? Was that the last 15 that you essentially ran?
That was definitely me sticking my flag in the ground and being pretty adamant about something different.
I love that it was that race. I actually got to meet Gabe when he was an athlete back in the day, when I was a fledgling coach at the national meet in Buffalo, I think it was. He was a unique individual, but man, he was an athlete. That dude could run you circles, buddy. Let me tell you. So at least it was that kind of race, not some, like, it was a race like, oh, okay, I kind of understand. Look who was in the race. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So did you, with that flag planted there, did you really, was there a sense of like ownership now? Like, okay, half mile, that is going to be my race. I got, and I'm definitely doing air quotes here, even though these are your words, I got lucky at indoor Big 12. You don't get lucky in a race like that, my man. That was talent. But was it now, okay, I've got my race. I'm going to be a half miler. Was there any sense of identity in that sense now?
Yeah, I think that it really became, all right, this is where I'm going to attach my name to that moment. And so, fast forward through the season, we run a few other high profile races, 800s, still doing well running, starting to run some fast times, get into the postseason. Freshman year, win the outdoor Big 12 championship, go on to the NCAA meet that year. I think it was in Bloomington, Indiana, that year. And that particular race is what really...
Was that 97?
That was 97.
It was downpouring.
That was the race that really sparked. Yeah, it was.
I was there.
To go from that one and then to dealing with what we had to deal with in Buffalo the next year. And
oh,
then,
my Lord. Freezing.
The Boise the previous year, the next year after that. And then I was like, man, who is picking these sites? But so win Big 12 that freshman year, move on to NCAA's, get, oh my God, waxed, like last. I think that was the race that really kind of started to solidify my my rise throughout the ranks of the NCAA, because after that race, I kind of had to sit down and have a talk with myself about, all right, it's just kind of embarrassing. Granted, no one knows who you are, but it's still kind of embarrassing.
But what happened? Because the training didn't change between those 2 weeks of Big 12 and NCAAs. Was because it was your first NCAAs, was it a mental thing of like, oh man, this is what I'm in college for, is this stage, or what was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit of those first time kind of jitters, and, knowing what I want to achieve and sort of the excellence that I put on myself to compete at. I didn't feel walking away from that particular NCAA championship that I was present in that moment.
Interesting.
And like I said, I had to have a talk with myself about being present from that point on. And
did you allow it to get bigger than it really was?
I think I did. I think the whole, you know, NCAA logo and NCAA meet and the who's who of track and collegiate track and field are all in one place, and you know, I just wasn't prepared for the sort of internal conflict that I was going to be having at that time. I was just, I don't know, straight up, I think I was just scared.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of a conversation we just had with Brooks Johnson this week about demystifying. We were talking about on the world record stage, demystifying that world record, that a human set it, and another, you know, you, is that's the world record you're after, you also can set it. You know, you put yourself in these boxes, and we have to overcome these barriers. So that's why I was asking, did you make it bigger than what it was? And certainly it's the big stage for NCAA, but again, at the end of the day, it's still 2 laps around the track, and you still compete. You're still the same person. That's interesting viewpoint. So how did you use that really learning episode there? What you have a choice, right? You can either learn from it or continue to fall into the trap. Did you use that as a learning moment? And if so, how did you use that in the next 3 years for the rest of the big races, the NCAAs, etc.?
Well, I think, you know, with every athlete who's done anything significant, or even athletes who haven't done anything significant, you know, there's always a team of people that are willing that are in your corner. And I was very fortunate that, you know, at that time, I had Jeff, who was my direct coach at that moment, and was very fortunate to be under the leadership of Dr. Rick McGuire, sports psychologist, as well as, you know, head track and field coach at Missouri. And so, you know, Coach and I had some conversations, you know, just from the mental side of things. The one thing that I do remember coming out of that race is that I told myself, we are never finishing last at another NCAA championship. And we never did.
I was going to say, did you hold true to that?
We never did, because the year after that, I was indoor runner-up and 4th place outdoors. And then the year after that, I eventually ended up winning too. And then was runner-up my senior year. So I think at that time I was growing. I was growing as a person. I was growing as an athlete. And a lot of that was due to the help that I was getting in not only training the physical side of what I was doing, but training the mental side aspect of the student athlete. And I think that was a really big weapon in my arsenal, because it did allow me to find the confidence to do the things that I wanted to do, but also find the confidence to do it the way that I wanted to do it.
You know, it's easy to forget, especially when you start running at a certain high level, qualifying for NCAA's, Big 12 champ, but it's easy to forget as a freshman that you're doing this. You're 19-ish years old. You're still a kid on all aspects. We now have the luxury. You and I are 2 years apart, so we've just crested that 40-year-old hump. You and I here, so we have the luxury of looking back now at, boy, what was I thinking as a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old or even a 30-year-old, right? But as a 19-year-old, it seems like when we start running the times that you're running, we forget that you're still a pup. You're still a kid. Dealing with these stressors and all this excitement that's going around. Like you said, the NCAA logo and your team's riding on you. These points really matter from Big 12 to now at Nationals to try to get in the rankings and stuff like that. It's an interesting aspect. I think I've lost you here a little bit, Derrick. Can you hear me? We'll give it just a second here and see if we get him back on. Hello, Derrick. All right, so let's end that. So you say you never finished last again in NCAA as you took that lesson to heart. So let's fast forward through college, and how did you implement that, and what kind of successes did you have? And when did you really start thinking that you might actually be able to run post-collegiately? Because that's a whole nother level.
So, once I had that realization, I think we went on to have, a fairly good NCAA career. Like I said, the year after that, I was runner-up indoors to the great David Krummenacher. Outdoors, I was fourth. Then Davis Robinson ended up winning that race. And then in 1999, I ended up winning the indoor championship in the New American Collegiate Record. And then outdoors, I repeated and won as well. And then the following year, after my senior year, I was runner-up to a good friend, Jess Strutzel, who ran for UCLA, and then Patrick Nduimana, who ended up running for Arizona. So, but it was probably my senior years when it really started, when I really kind of started to float the idea of doing it post-collegiately. At that time, I was really just kind of staying on my own career track of, working after college. And so once I was fully done with my my career at Missouri, we kind of started having the conversation about, all right, so we got Olympic trial year, you're gonna go to trials, whatever. At that time, I had the fastest time on paper going into the trial, so kind of a little significance. But ended up signing with Adidas at the time, and Mark Wetmore, Global Athletics and Marketing, ended up becoming my agency. So we had a great career with them. So I was with Adidas for about 8 years, up until retiring right before the 08 trials.
And I really want to make sure we spend some time on Coach Peterson, not just athlete Derrick here, right? It's amazing when you add coach, you go to the last name for some reason. But let's not diminish. Give us some highlights here. PRs, Olympic teams. Let's set the stage for what you ended up doing in your career in this 800-meter event.
Okay. So brief, the fast warp speed approach to my career. So my PR indoors is 1:45.88 up until Devin Dixon broke that a couple of seasons ago. Devin Dixon, Texas A&M, broke that a couple years ago. I was the American Collegiate record holder for, I think, almost 20 years.
Wow.
So that was exciting to hold on to that. I was excited for Devin because he's another South Georgian. We kind of grew up in the same community around Atlanta. Don't know each other, but kind of grew up around the same area and stuff. Let's see. I ran at two Olympic trials. The first one was very unsuccessful, which fueled my fire for the next one, which the second one became prosperous for me. I ended up making the 2004 Athens Olympic team. Competed in Athens at the Olympics. Great time, great experience, highlight of my athletic career for sure. And then came home and started my coaching career at that point.
Being in track and field and at the level you have been and are at, and what I get to do, I'm so blessed what I get to do here at Gill Athletics. It's sometimes easy to gloss over the term I'm an Olympian, because every 4 years I'm at every trials and I get to see the top 3 in each event make the Olympics and things like that. But man, let's not gloss over that. You are of the 1% of the 1% of athletes, specifically in track and field, and even more specifically in the 800-meter dash, that made it to an Olympics. When you cross that finish line, and maybe as a guy who never will ever make the Olympics, was it when you crossed the finish line? Was it later? When did the realization of, holy crap, I'm an Olympian? When did that hit, and how did it hit you?
It was definitely pretty immediate, because knowing what I went through and what had occurred 4 years previous, I was hell-bent going into that Olympic trials, not allowing the same fate, so to speak. Because rarely do you have to go into an Olympic trials in the same location that it didn't go well at 4 years later.
Sacramento, probably,
track.
Right? Yeah.
Same track,
Interesting.
few of the same people. So it was definitely an emotional week. Obviously, you just got to block out all of the emotion and just go do the task at hand.
Well, I
And
love
so
that. I love that it was the same track that you had a bad experience on. Because again, you the next time you're at that track 4 years later, you've got a decision to make mentally here. You know you're fit. The athletic ability is there because of the coaching and what you've done through the different rounds and the different races through the couple of years. But mentally, wherever it went bad, if there was like a pinpoint place where there's like the 600-meter mark or whatever the first time, you had to overcome that the second time. You had to pass by the place where it went bad 4 years ago and supercharge your way to go. That's awesome, man. That's so cool.
Yeah, I'll never. I mean, even in that final, I'll never forget it because, you know, for the most part, I was in sort of the fifth, sixth person position. Really good friend of mine, current coach right up the street from you at the University of Illinois, Jabri Harris, had taken the field out in a blistering 50-point, and there was a massive gap between him, Jonathan Johnson, and then the rest of the crowd. And so the rest of the crowd is me, Kadivas Robinson, David Krummenacker, trying to remember who else is in that race. I apologize, I can't remember all of you, but we were all in this pack of people just racing. It's like, all right, in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, at some point they got to come back to us. And at some point I gotta start thinking about, okay, is this a race that's worth winning? Or is this a race that's worth just finishing in the top three to accomplish the goal?
Right. The third place, I'm gonna say, pays the same. I know there's a
right.
money, but you the same result. You get to go to the Olympics, third or second or first, right?
Yeah. So I won't forget. I got to, I think it was about the 550 mark, and that's kind of when I kind of started moving up into the crowd and not up into the field. And I was just kind of kept telling myself, all right, we can't get all of them, but somebody's gonna come back to you. And so you kind of have to start making that realization at that point. All right, 3 of you make this team, and that's the whole goal of the day, is to make the team. Yes, you would love to win. Yes, you would love the bonus for winning, but there's still a bonus for second place and third place. At the end of the day, you're all going to team processing and getting on the plane in a couple of months and going to Athens. So let's get prepared for the realistic goal at hand right now. Let's do what we got to do. And if the opportunity comes up for you to get to the top spot, then take it. And so that last 100 meters of that race was just, all right, hold on for dear life and pray to God no one's passing you in these last couple of steps, but you better run all the way through this line.
Man, I got goosebumps, man, because I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes. It's interesting how your memory of the 550 and the 700-meter mark, and all the things that you just articulated there about, okay, I'd love to get the first place bonus, but you know what? I still go to the team if I'm third. Like, is all of that going through your mind, or is it only the task at hand, the person whose back is right in front of you? How do I get to that person? What's that mindset there?
It kind of, it puts you in a state that, you got to make a split decision. And either one could work or neither of them could work. But you got to trust your gut, and you got to trust everything that you've been working toward, and you got to commit to it. And I think all of us who ended up making that team that day, we were fully committed to whatever our plan was that day. And it was getting on that team.
Man, that's so cool. I could talk about that single race all day, to be real honest with you. But let's start transitioning to Coach Peterson as you wind down your career. You start coaching at your alma mater. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And what led you into coaching, and what challenges did you have, if any, right off the bat?
At first, I didn't necessarily want to go into coaching. I think I was doing everything I could to run away from coaching.
Sounds like the 800 meter in high school.
Yeah, you'll find this might be a common theme with me. So I'm kind of on the tail end of my career, and I hadn't really thought a whole lot about next steps. At that point, it was just single focus on 2008 Olympic trials. Even though I was still in volunteer, actually, I went from volunteer to interim position at some point. At the time, our sprints and hurdles coach was taking a new career decision, and so we had an opening on our team. And I remember Coach McGuire came to me and asked me if I would fill in with sprints and hurdles at that time. And I was like, oh, I don't really know nothing about sprints and hurdles. So
right, yeah.
I don't know what to expect from me, kind of thing. He was like, don't worry, we'll get you all the resources. We'll get you in contact with people that can mentor you through it. And fully encouraged me to go get my USATF level 1, which is where
now let's talk about level 1. And we're, as we get into coaching, dear listener, you're going to hear, just the amazing things that Derrick has been able to transition from his athletic side to the coaching career. However, I think it all started with his level 1, where he had maybe the best teacher I could ever have thought for you, Derrick. That's actually, being a little ego here, I actually was his level 1 instructor for, I don't know if I was doing sprints and hurdles or jumps or both at that point, but let me tell you what, you have done a fantastic job of passing the barrier that I was able to teach you at, my man. I'm glad I did not hold you back.
Well, we all got to start somewhere, and if you don't know what you're doing, I always encourage people to get the knowledge from people who do know what they're doing. And so got my level 1, really got thrown into coaching, into the, in my opinion, at that time, best track conference in the country, Big 12. So at that point in my young coaching career, I got to coach against coaching greats, Coach Hart at Baylor, Coach Kearney at Texas, Deion Miller at Texas Tech when he was there.
Revelto. Not sure when Stanley got in over Kansas. Yeah. I mean, it is the who's who, absolutely.
So I'm just a young pup out there, and just trying to be relevant, with the athletes that I got, and just encouraging them not to back down, no matter what name is across any of my athletes' chest, and let's see what we can do.
And how many years did you spend at Mizzou as the assistant coach?
So I was there for 6 years, in my role as sprints and hurdles coach.
When you were, so sprints and hurdles, because again, this is the main reason to talk to you about the half mile, right? It's this, excuse me, all half mile purist out there. It's this bastard event, right? So as the sprints and hurdles coach, did you coach the 800, or was that in the distance coach's purview?
Towards the latter part, middle to latter part of my career as sprints and hurdles coach, I did eventually end up working with our half milers, along with my good friend Joe Lynn, who's at University or UNC Charlotte right now. We kind of split once some of our half milers kind of went the distance route, and then the ones that were a little bit more, middle of the road kind of were under my tutelage. So, yeah, it was a really good tandem, the two of us, because we kind of worked really well together.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the few events where you could, like what you just described there, isn't foreign, right? Like, oh yeah, one coach kind of took this more distance-oriented half-mile group, and maybe this coach took the more sprint-oriented. No other event is like that. We've never, I can't think of a conversation ever in my 25-plus years now in track and field where we talked about steeplechasers. Like, yeah, some of my steeplechasers go with my distance coach, and some of mine go with my. No one talks about that for that event or any other event out there. Decathlon and heptathlon would be the next closest, right? And that's because there's 7 to 10 different, wildly different events. So you go through, you start coaching half milers. You're starting to come into your own as far as your style of coaching,
Mhm.
specifically half milers.
With that group, I think a lot of what I learned by being a sprints and hurdles coach sort of started to bleed over into some of the stuff that I was doing with a lot of my half milers. Up until then, I was probably one of the coaches that was very purist on, we got to be doing 50, 55, 60 miles a week, and 200s, and then, some of the stuff that I learned coaching quarter milers, coaching 200-meter runners, starting to implement some of, the drills and stuff there with that group. Really, I think started to help those couple of guys and young ladies start to flourish in those events.
I have so many questions about coaching the half mile, but I want to make sure we honor the stages of your career here. So after Mizzou, you went to, was it Columbia College after that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and that's in Columbia, Missouri. How convenient is that?
Right up the road.
Yeah, and so tell me more. I don't know much about Columbia College. Tell me more about that school.
Well, it's a very young program. So when I started there, we were actually just starting the program there. So myself, another Mizzou track and field alum, Tim Cornell, and current head coach Tracy Jex. We were sort of the three main catalysts for providing Columbia College with their first men's and women's track and cross country team. The cross country piece had already been there. Then they wanted to have a full squad, so we went full force into trying to recruit 70 kids for year one.
Yeah.
To which they've gone on and done well. I think Tim and Tracy have done a good job with that program. The men's cross country group was national runner-up, national NAI runner-ups in cross country a few years ago. And we've had a few All-Americans and I think a national champion. Yeah. So
that's cool.
For a young program.
Yeah, I love new programs. Growth is good for our sport. So I love hearing about new programs. That's so cool. We need more of that.
Some of you ADs out there, growth is good.
Growth is good. Our boss here, our president, he has this saying. I probably heard it the very first day I worked here 14 years ago, and it's really stuck with me. He says, "Healthy things grow." And if you think about that, it's like, oh yeah, that's correct. You think about your garden, you think about athletic programs, your own athletic career. When I was growing, I was healthy. Things were flourishing. And maybe when I wasn't growing, when I maybe stagnated in my event or my garden's not growing, things aren't that healthy. So healthy things grow. Mr. and Mrs. Athletic Directors, we need to grow our participation, not shrink, as we've been doing here for the past couple of days. So let's continue to make good decisions out there. So from Columbia, you go to DePaul. You go to the big city of Chicago, man.
Yeah. So summer of summer of 16? Yeah, because I started August 16. Summer 16. My boss, good friend, head coach Dave Dofek gives me a call. Asked me first and foremost, hey, do you think your wife would mind living in Chicago?
Hey, that tells you how smart that man is. That was the number one question. That was a very smart question.
Yes, very much so. And so I was like, well, what are we trying to get at here? And so he's like, I have a position opening up as a business coach, and I wanted to call you about it. Up until that time, I was just like, why me? So he explained the story of a previous interview that I had done for a position at DePaul. And I guess the elegance and aura of who I am, just being stupid now, stuck with him because he said something about that interview. I kept your resume in a drawer, and if I ever got the opportunity to work with you again, I wanted to, give you a call. And so he gave me a call, see if I was interested. I was like, yeah, why not?
That's a really good lesson. I love that you had interviewed before and it didn't work out for whatever reason or reasons. When you for coaches that are interviewing at different institutions or wanting to interview at different institutions, maybe that's a really good lesson, that the door is not ever shut. Maybe you might shut the door. You may say, okay, fine, DePaul didn't hire me, I'm never going to go to DePaul. But instead, if you continue to keep that air of openness and have yourself attuned to opportunities, that it may come back around, and that might have been the right time. It might not have worked well the first time, so maybe it was just the right time to come around the second time. That's a really good lesson right there. I like that.
Yeah, and I believe it as well. I mean, I think at that time, maybe I wasn't prepared to move my family to Chicago. You know, we were a young family at that time, and you know, we had a whole lot of stuff going on, you know, here in Columbia. And so next time around, worked out. Get the call, wife gives me the okay. I pack my stuff up and off to Chicago we go.
So what's it like coaching at DePaul in Chicago? My wife is from Chicago, and I used to live there. So it's a great, for me, it's a great city to visit, to be real frank. But it is a great city. How do you like it there at DePaul?
Well, I love it at DePaul. Honestly, I have a great administration. I have a great group of people that I get to go to work with every day. Not just good people. I would go so far as to call them really good friends.
Wow.
The staff that I get the opportunity to do this journey of track and field and cross country with, we're all so in tune with each other, not just with the job that we're doing, just everything, you know, whether it be just walking to the corner store to go get lunch or something or another. There's a camaraderie amongst us that allows each of us to do our job at the highest level that we can. And our administration is extremely supportive of how we're doing it, why we're doing it the way we're doing it. So I can't thank them enough. Well, also the vision that Dave has for the programs, you know, it resonates with my vision as a coach, as I get to handle the cross country and the middle distance and distance pieces of it, but even down to our sprints and hurdles and our throws coach. And I think that the direction that he's leading us in allows us to have this fun.
What I'm hearing you say, tell me if I'm hearing this right, you guys as a coaching staff have a very holistic relationship, that it's not just about, okay, when we're in the office, we're coaches on the same team, but even how your personal life fits into it, you know, family time and things like that. It's much, I'm hearing this holistic type of relationship and friendship, which is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that, you know, there is, if one of us succeeds in what we're doing, we're all succeeding, because we're all there trying to be the best versions of ourselves for our student athletes. But we're also trying to be the best version of ourselves for our coaching comrades. If one of us is hurting, all of us is hurting. If one of us is having a good day, we're all going to share in that goodness of that day.
You know, leadership is so important, and leadership does start at the top. So kudos to Dave for exemplifying that leadership. And then, you know, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So he has to have you guys as the coaching staff to be on board and add your own leadership to that. So that's so refreshing to hear, that camaraderie. And, you know, when one of us succeeds, we all succeed as a coaching staff for our sport. That's really cool. I'm willing to bet you guys probably get a little bit more out of your kids because of that cohesiveness than a coaching staff that maybe is more splintered or self-seeking.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are and who we are and what we're about definitely trickles down to our kids, and they feel it as well. You know, I've had a number of my athletes come to me and say, man, I'm always amazed at, you know, the ease of how you four, you know, our two grad assistants work together, whether it be just in the office or at a track meet or at a championship meet. It's just so organic.
That's a huge compliment right there. Yeah, the ease of which you guys work together. That's huge. I like that. Well, let's start talking about the 800 meters here. So I'm dangerous enough in the 800 meters. I've seen a ton of 800 meter races. I've seen your 800 meter races. I love that. You're Indiana, because I was there, and I remember being underneath the shelving or whatever it was, because it was just downpouring. It's where I met Victor Houston. I got him. I'm such a fanboy. He was on the cover of the brochure or whatever. I had him autograph. I remind him that every time I see him, man. That was a fantastic championship. It was unbelievable. A competitor of mine in high school in the Southeast Alabama area, Chris Cummings, he either won the 100-meter dash for LSU or was top 3. So it was that was a fantastic NCAA championships. So with the half mile, and you have already made your asterisk, your caveat that you are not the be all end all, and that's not what this is meant to be here, Derrick. What we're here to talk about in this section of the episode is your ideas, and honestly, super interested in maybe your development of how you coach 800-meter runners. So why don't you start with what maybe is your current philosophy for 800-meter training? And we realize that we're almost never singularly focused, right? These are going to be 815 kids. These are going to be 8 and 400 kids. These are going to be 800 runners who maybe run cross country. Talk to us about your philosophy currently, and how did that develop, or has it always been the same since you were in high school?
So I think currently, my approach to it is, first and foremost, let's get the athlete there. Let's find an athlete that wants to be where you are and believes in what you're doing, believes in who you are and how you're doing it. So that's always step one for me. And then at that point, we kind of start to develop them. I like to take a little bit of what you've already done that made you successful, study it a little bit, see if there's room for it in, sort of our matrix of training, which isn't nowhere solidified. It's very, adjustable. And then, we kind of lay the foundation, whether that be through aerobic work or through some other means of getting aerobic work. Like I'm not a firm believer anymore that, every half miler needs to be fully mileage focused. So I take a lot of things that I've learned from other coaches, whether it be Coach Henry at Texas A&M, John Smith when he was out at UCLA. So I like to study what other people have done, and just kind of analyze it a lot. I don't necessarily use like a cookbook. All right, they did this, and this because their athletes were successful. But I like to at least see what other people are doing and see if it somewhat fits some parts of who we are and what we're doing with our training.
So within your group, for your 800-meter runners, do you typically have what I'm going to call a long 800-meter group and a short 800-meter group, or is the training kind of all the same regardless?
It's definitely not all the same. I mean, I do have 2 different groups, particularly during the fall. I do have a specific group that probably never ever will see a cross country course unless they're there cheering or carrying the Kool-Aid, the water cooler. But I also have a few guys and girls that may see some limited action during the fall and the cross country season. I'm not sure they all need to run a 10K, even though Jeff, you made me run 2 of them. But
no bitterness there, Jeff. Years later, he is still thinking about that.
I can't complain because our team did get to nationals in cross country that year. So it was a 10K at the NCAA cross country national meet. So no complaints there. But once we get into that posted season, I don't think my half milers need to be out running the 10K during the regional system. At that point, we kind of take a break and start getting prepared for the indoor season. But during the fall, whether it be with my non-cross country group, we're doing fartleks, we're doing cut down 800s or a shortened version of 1,000 repeats. We're doing some things to allow them to still get some aerobic work in without having to be out there slugging the miles all the time.
So Now, on the collegiate level, you have the luxury of knowing a little bit more about that athlete that comes into your program, right? Because they've run so many races in high school, and whether like you were running miles and even 2 miles, you had some understanding of that athlete's background and whether they're a short 800-meter runner or more of a long 800-meter runner. How would you what would you advise for a high school coach who, they're getting new kids that have never run for, they don't have any background on these kids? How do we decide if they're going to be more of the short 800-meter type versus the long 800-meter type?
The beauty of high school, I think, is I love that you don't have to specialize so much, so maybe a little bit of trial and error may be the wrong word, but allowing them to do different things, I think, not only sets them up for what they may eventually become down the line, but it does allow them to kind of touch all aspects of the sport. Because at the high school, we also have to remember that a lot of these kids are still developing physically. And so we can't just, all right, you're going to be a half miler. And then a year later, this kid may grow to be 6 feet tall or might not even grow at all. And so kid probably may not be a half miler. Probably eventually might be a really good high jumper. So you got to kind of just play with it a little bit. That would be my advice to a high school coach.
Yeah, I loved your background coming up through middle school, that I think you said you dabbled in a lot of different events. So I can imagine you doing some jumps and maybe even some throws. I remember very specifically when I coached at Troy University, we had a young man, he was a 5K kid for us. I think he ran 14:12. So, he wasn't really good for us, but, he wasn't shabby at all, from England. And this was early in my coaching career, really impactful to me. He talked about his growth through the club model over in Europe. And he one day he tells me, and I won't try to do his accent, but it was awesome. But he told me, he's like, yeah, I was actually a triple jumper. And I'm like, a triple jumper? Like, you're a 5K kid. What are you talking about? He's like, oh yeah, we do it all. We triple jumped. I did some shot put. And it really helped him find what his real niche was, which was distance running, but it also allowed him to become an athlete, not a 5K person. You know what I'm saying? It really helped him overall in his athletic development.
Yeah, and that's what I like. I think even, with any other sport out there, I think best athletes are always going to rise. And as sport professionals, we need to always be encouraging people to become the best athlete of themselves, not just spending time specializing in one thing or another.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
Learning a lot from the Last Dance documentary right now. Some of the stuff I already knew, but Jordan was just an athlete, period. And I think that's what allowed him to flourish.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think this may be, I'm gonna put you on the spot here a little bit, maybe. Do you think the youth clubs, because we start them at 6, 7, 8 years old, are they a positive towards this trying different events, or is it more detrimental that a kid gets locked in as an 800-meter runner at 6 years old and then that's all he does for the rest of his career?
I can't speak for the club system because I'm not a club coach. But I do believe that most of them serve the kids well in their intro into the sport. Maybe there's a handful out there that, kind of know right off the bat what this kid's future may look like. But for the most part, I think 98% of them are serving our youth quite well.
Yeah, and I put you on the spot. That wasn't real fair, so I appreciate that. That was very poignant, though. That was a great answer. So let's talk about the half milers as you get them, and maybe even some of your own experiences. The 800-meter, again, it's such a unique event. I remember at Mississippi State, we had Tiffany McWilliams, and she was a front runner. I mean, that gun went off, and she was going straight to first place, and you were going to have to hawk her down, basically.
Yep.
And I'm remembering of one of my favorite runners to half milers to watch, Robbie Andrews. Robbie
Mm-hmm.
would be dead last at the 600-meter mark, and it seems sometimes he was dead last by, this is an extreme exaggeration, but it seemed like he'd be 300 meters back from the guy in first.
Oh
And
yeah.
he would run the freaking world record in the 200, it seems, and win the race. I mean, you can't get, those are the best examples I can give of just two extremely different styles for the half mile. My question is not necessarily how to coach once you find out which one they are, because obviously they'd be coached a little bit differently. How do you figure out if you have a front runner half miler or a sit and kick half miler?
I think you let them do both. You know, it depending on the race. You know, if you have an athlete and they're comfortable doing something, and you know it works, then you develop that piece so that it keeps working for them. But it's okay to allow them to feel different aspects of the race. Because I know even in my own athletic career, there were some times that Jeff would tell me, like, go to the front of this race and see what happens. Sit in the middle of the race and see what happens. I think you have to touch all aspects of a race because you never know, honestly, what's going to happen when the gun goes off. You know, it could be a slow tactical race, as most championship races sometimes are. And if you're a kicker, great. If you're not, and that's what you're used to, you get into a race and, you know, guy goes out at 50 points, then you're freaking out, not knowing what to do. And so you have to kind of prepare yourself for all aspects of how that particular race goes. That's my opinion of it.
And I made an assumption there when I said the front runner stylist versus the sit and kick would be trained differently. Is that correct, or do you still train them in the same ways? You just race tactics are different.
I think you still train them the same way, but the flexibility comes in the racing tactics.
And what was your style? Were you a front runner, a sit and kicker, or right in the middle guy? What were you? I
was probably more of the middle to kicking from the back kind of guy. There are a few races that, yeah, I would go to the front of, but I was never going to be a 50, 51 second, first quarter guy. I was probably going to always be like maybe a high 52, 53, and then really start to work from the strengths that I had in the latter stages of the races.
And when you have an athlete who, for the male side, you know, is 52, 53 on the split, how much are you working to, you know, what I would call speed reserve? How much are you working to try to increase or decrease, I guess, their 400-meter PR so that 52 is much more comfortable?
I think we're always working to keep their speed reserves. I call it active because the one thing I always tell my athletes, no matter if they're 800-meter runner all the way up to my 10K runners, at some point in every race, you got to become a sprinter. You got to get to the finish line before the next man, the next woman that may be in front of you, or the person that's trying to run you down from the back. So if we're not constantly touching on those aspects of our training, as your coach, I'm you know, basically giving you a disservice. You can go out and run all day long, but if we're in a championship race and it comes down to you getting that 1 point that we may need, and you cannot kick the person that you got to be to get to that 1 point, what are we doing?
So that's a really good point about at every point, in every race at some point, you're going to have to be a sprinter. That's interesting. I've never heard it verbalized like that.
Yeah. So our kids know on, you know, Monday and maybe a Thursday, we're working and touching some aspects of their, you know, learning how to, as I call it, pick them up and put them down.
That's very old school. I like that.
Yeah, I learned from a lot of old school guys.
And we're going to get to that. I want to know some influences. We know high school coaching influences, but I want to get to some coaching influences here in a second. But I did want to touch on your opinion and your program. What is the role of strength training for a half mile or mid distance kid?
Oh, I think it's critical. I'm in constant meetings with our strength coach, um, making sure that what we're doing outside of the weight room is complement to what we're doing in the weight room. Like, I don't want my kids just going in there just lifting just to be lifting, or doing something that has no benefit to what we're going to get on a workout day or competition. And so we're kind of one heartbeat when it comes to that notion, because I am a firm believer that strength training does help you get stronger. I think for my middle distance group, there's a little bit of dynamic stuff that they need to do in the weight room to keep them able to have the success that they're having on the track. So I'm a firm believer in the strength and conditioning coach as a component of our training. And even with our distance kids, I mean, a lot of my distance kids, we've had to have conversations about strength training, because some of them just don't understand it. They don't see the correlation of it. And once we get them in there and they kind of start seeing the results of it, it's pretty easy at that point to keep them in there.
Proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
What on the track we've talked about, this delineation of a long half miler and a short half miler. In the weight room, is there similarities? Are there, if you're a long half miler, do you do a little bit different weight training than the short half milers, or once you get in the weight room, is it all the same?
There's a few things that we do the same, and then there's a portion of our training where the groups get broken off. My longer, more 800 miler type guys and girls are probably going to do something a little bit more in line with my 3K, 5K kids. And then our more speedier half milers are going to probably do something more in line with something maybe our quarter milers and 400 hurdlers are doing.
So there's real individualization of this, and we're talking about really one event here. But as you are working through your entire group, there's quite a bit of, I'm hearing, an individualization of weight training, what you do on the track, maybe what kind of mileage you're putting in. That's super interesting.
I have 3 guys currently, early four guys currently that are kind of in our 800 meter group. All 4 of them tend to do a little bit of difference in their training.
Interesting. That's tough to keep up sometime as a coach, but I think that might be the very definition of coach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How much did what you and how you achieved success in this event, how much does that influence how you coach, or are you evolved in doing different things than what you did to be successful?
I think a little bit of my foundation and then the base of how I approach coaching is influenced by what I did as an athlete. But again, I've recognized really early on, like every year I'm going to get a different athlete. And so I have to meet my athletes in the middle. I have to understand who they are. I have to understand what drives them, so that then I can adjust how I coach that particular athlete.
I love that, meeting them where they're at and what motivates them intrinsically, extrinsically, and then you adjust what happens on the track or in the weight room. That's interesting. That's really coaching the person and not the event. That's really poignant there. So we all, there's a famous book, you are the combination of the 5 people closest to you and all those kind of things. I won't pigeonhole you down to a number to try to make this as fair as possible, but who is on your Mount Rushmore of half mile coaches? When you're thinking about, I need to pick up the phone and talk to someone, who are the, and I won't even get, like I said, I won't give you a number. Who are your advisors, if you would, as you continue to develop and become a better coach every day?
If I had all their phone numbers, emails, social medias, who would I call? I mean, my good friend Jabri Harris, again, at Illinois, we conversate quite often about training. You know, having grown up in the same area, competed against each other in high school, competed against each other in a little bit of college and post-collegiately. We share a lot of the same ideals as coaches. So we do bounce a lot of ideas off of each other. Obviously, my college coach is always a phone call away when he's not down in Daytona watching races. So the only time I can't get a hold of him is during Daytona week. But oh, so many. Shoot.
It's really unfair. Don't worry about missing anybody. I'm just curious of who influences you, and certainly those two. You know, Jabari, what a great dude. Love that guy to death, and we've spoken highly of Jeff. Absolutely. Do you still talk
I love
to
Frank?
I'm sorry, I cut you off. What, Frank? Who?
I was saying I love Frank Gagliano's approach to coaching. He's definitely a resource there. And then, you know, from a pure 400, 800 coaching aspect, I would go with, shoot. Surprisingly enough, I mean, Coach Hart is a really good resource. A lot of people don't understand what he's done. I mean, everyone knows him for his 400 training and whatnot, but you know, the stuff that he does has done with 800 meter runners is pretty significant as well.
Yeah, the 4x4 gets all the publicity at Baylor, but
yeah,
go look at the 400 hurdles, go look at the 800, go look at the 200, go look at the milers. They have definitely gotten it done historically at Baylor University with Coach Hart.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And I think my the GOAT of all GOATs definitely has to be Coach McDonald, John McDonald. I mean,
yeah,
guy is, I mean, he's old school in his methods, but between him and Coach Dick Weiss, former coach at Oklahoma State, a lot of resources there.
Yeah, boy, forgive me for not even having those in my head. I'm so focused on who's coaching right now. But yeah, those two names, Coach Weiss and Coach McDonald. I mean, come on, man, legends, right?
Right.
Absolute legends. Well, Derrick, as we start transitioning and wrapping up here, I got kind of this is a non-half mile question. You're off the hot seat for the 800 meter dash now.
Oh, thank you.
What I'm that lasted this so far, this episode is roughly my PR for the 800. It took an hour or something for me. At least it felt that way. That's for sure. What I'm interested in as we start wrapping up here is how excited are you for this upcoming cross country and track season, since we did not get a finished indoor and an outdoor season? How pumped are you? What's got you excited for this upcoming season?
I mean, I can't even, I mean, obviously you can see my face right now, but maybe everyone listening to this can feel the excitement that I have for what I'm hoping our fall will become. Last fall, we had a really breakthrough cross country season for both our men's and women's teams. And most of those athletes are coming back, and you know, we kind of re-upped with some fairly decent, newcomers. So I'm over the moon at this point for cross country. So no matter what it may look like, I'm just excited to get back to training, seeing my guys and girls every day. I'm excited to get back to competing, and really I'm ready, you know. And honestly, the kids, when I talk to them every day about training, they're ready too. Obviously, we did miss an outdoor season, which we were kind of on an upswing of what we could get done, but I think that same fire is still going to be there in the fall, and I can't wait to be there with them. seeing the results of it.
I'm so pumped to see you and the rest of the Blue Demons. Sometimes you need something taken away from you for you to almost wake up and realize how special it is. And so to have our track season taken away from us, boy, it tells you just, I think people are really woke in the sense of like, oh my God, I do love track and field. I do love coaching. I do love Saturdays being around the circle. And so to that first track, track specifically, I think people are just going to be so stoked and happy, and athletes are going to come back with a vengeance. I think coaches are using this time, from what I can tell. I'm hearing repeatedly, coaches are taking this time to do two very important things. They're starting to understand their personal, they got to take care of themselves mental health wise, physical health wise, things like that. So I think they're going to come back, guys like you are going to come back even more refreshed, if you will. And then I'm hearing left and right that coaches are using this time to evaluate what they've done coaching wise and how can they get better. So you take that combination with the hunger that really a natural hunger that an athlete has to have if they're of any merit, right? They got to have natural hunger. You take that combination, I think we're in for a real treat. I think this may be PR city. We may see records broken every single day.
Exactly. Like if there was a golden age in track and field, I think you're about to see the second coming of it. I honestly think with the way things are lining themselves up and the inspiration and the internal reflection that a lot of people are having, man, this could be the greatest time to be a fan of our sport.
Great point. It doesn't all occur in 1 year. This actually, you're right. This could set us up for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of a new golden age, man. I'm so pumped, man. And I know you are too. I can't wait it's great to see you through an interview process like this, but you know what, honestly, you look better when I see you at the track, brother, man. I see you there with the clipboard and the schedule and directing the kids to their events. That's your natural state. And I can't wait to see you back there again. Thank you so much for joining me today. That's it. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us, man. I hope this was a good experience for you. I had an absolute blast today.
This has been great. Even from my own, personal and even from getting back to some form of normal for me. It's always great to talk about our journeys, and always great to just in a sense talk shop.
That's it.
Talk our sport, talk our profession. And that's what I love about what you're doing with this podcast, is you're allowing us as coaches to come from behind the website, come from behind the stats and the performances that our kids have accomplished. And it is allowing names and voices to become one. And so I definitely say keep it up. Even as we get past, all of this stay at home and everybody stuck in the house and their own little isolated bubbles and whatnot, keep this going, man. There's so many people out there in this profession whose voices that need to be heard and people need to know about.
Hey, thank you for that encouragement. That means a lot. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We love the people whose profession is track coach. Derrick Peterson means a lot to us because he is a coach. That's your role. Your identity is Derrick. And we love you guys so much. And that's exactly why we started this, there's a very specific reason why we named it Connections. It was to connect coaches, specifically around the country, but even around the world, for guys and gals that are thinking about getting into coaching. Can you do it? You can. The guys and gals that we interview here, they show you the route that they took, and then you can go make your own route. And so having stories like yours, Derrick, of elite level athlete, the journey that you took to get there, and then your coaching journey, that's inspiring to people. And so if we can bring that story and connect it with others out there, and they receive hope that they can do it and more, it's worth it, as they say. So having so much fun. So thank you for that encouragement, man. I really do appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, Derrick Peterson, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.